Hi, I'm going to talk to Larry Sabato about this latest Iowa poll that a lot of people in the political world are actually, really focused on. And the Harris campaign is very excited about it. The Trump campaign has really dismissed this. It's this Iowa poll that showed a lot of independent women breaking for Kamala Harris, but according to Larry Sabato from the Miller Center for Politics at the University of Virginia, my alma mater, it means a lot more than just Iowa. So I thought we would just chat with him briefly, you guys, and get Larry's take on what this means in terms of other Rust Belt states. Let's get right to it, Larry.
Okay.
Everyone's talking about this Iowa poll, and I'm going to let you explain what it shows, and then we'll talk about what it means.
Yes, this is a well-established poll with a great track record. It's not perfect. No poll has a perfect track record. It's been mainly right. A few times it's been wrong. Conducted by Ann Selzer, is very well known, and she focuses mainly on Iowa. She knows Iowa like the back of her hand. And people really pay attention to this poll. They have for decades. And we often stay up late. You know, the nerds, those of us who do politics, we stay up late on Saturday night so we can see the web page or whatever we had in the old days.
And this is always done,
It
Larry. This is, sorry to interrupt, but this is always done the Saturday before the election.
Well, the timing varies, but usually it is. Usually it's the weekend before the election, at least the final one. She's done a series of them. The last one had Trump up by 4 points, which people thought was surprising because Trump carried Iowa by 8 to 10 points in both 2016 and 2020. It's one of his stronger states. But he was up by 4, and the Trump people said at the time, well, that's an underestimation. So many of the other polls, and they're right, showed Trump up about what you would expect in Iowa. So last night, we were fully expecting to see Trump up by a minimum of 3 or 4, and 3 or 4 was the number. It was +3 Harris. Harris up over Trump by 3 points in Iowa. Well, the general reaction was, we can't believe it because there's no way that Trump would lose Iowa. There are too many things in his favor there. Iowa, like Ohio and some of the other Midwestern states, have been very inclined toward Trump's message. But as we examined the poll more carefully and we got more information about it, it did make some sense because the defections from Trump in Iowa are similar to defections we've begun to detect elsewhere. Certainly women, but particularly older women, and women being concerned about the loss of reproductive rights and also about Trump's approach. Now you might say, well, my goodness, why now? He's said all of these obnoxious things for 9 years. Why in the world would there be such a strong reaction now? And Katie, this just underlines how important the final week or 10 days of a campaign is, because you always have a certain percentage of undecided. It's small, but they're there, and they start paying attention because voting is on their agenda. They have to catch up with the campaign. And what people have seen is Donald Trump having, I think, one of his worst 10-day stretches of the campaign, saying terrible things, insulting people or his comedians and other supporters at that Madison Square Garden. Trump himself stumbling repeatedly during the week, and they got turned off.
He said things like, I'm going to protect women whether they want me to or
Whether
not,
they
something along
like it or
those
not.
lines, whether they like it or
like
not.
it or not.
And additionally, a lot of these independent women, according to what I was reading last night, Larry, have broken for Donald Trump. Can you talk about that and how big the vote is for independents in Iowa? And then we'll talk about what this portends for other Rust Belt states potentially.
Yes, the independent women have been breaking for Harris because they've been offended by the things they've seen recently and
Did I
whatnot.
say Trump? I didn't mean to say
Yeah,
Trump.
no, I
I'm
knew you
sorry if I did.
did. I
Okay.
was trying to subtly correct you without pointing it
That's
out, but
okay.
you've
I
completely ruined
apologize.
this now.
I'm sorry. Independent women have broken for Harris. I
Yeah, yes,
apologize,
they broke it
everyone.
for Harris, but not just independent women, women over 65. Now, to me, that's young. That's a young woman,
Thank you,
but
Larry.
still, yeah, they're older. They're older in the sense that obviously they personally don't have to worry about reproductive freedom or reproductive services, but they worry about it for their children and grandchildren. That's the
And
connection
perhaps
there.
they remember, and perhaps they're old enough to remember what life was like before 1973 when Roe v. Wade became the law of the land.
Exactly. When frequently we would read in the newspaper about back alley abortions resulting in the death of women. It was a regular feature in the newspaper as long as it wasn't banned entirely. Some areas banned it
But
entirely. But in any
also,
event,
I
yes,
was
go
going to
ahead.
say, I'm sorry, I was going to say, Larry, and additionally, we have to get this in a little bit of time. Iowa had enacted a 6-week abortion ban, correct?
Yes,
So some Iowans are kind of hopping mad about that, right?
that is correct. And it just went into effect for sure in the summer. So this is new. This isn't, people talk about, well, Dobbs is so 2022. No, actually, in Iowa and a number of other states, the court fights have stretched out the argument about abortion. And some of these very restrictive laws are just going into effect. Perfect timing for a Democratic candidate who's pro reproductive rights, like Kamala Harris. Very bad for a Republican candidate like Donald Trump, who is responsible for the overturning of Roe v. Wade.
Let's talk about what this may mean for other states, particularly in the Rust Belt. Can you talk about that,
Yes,
Larry?
uh, the state that I'm looking to most of all is Wisconsin, because over the years, Iowa has well represented how some of these rural counties in Wisconsin that are quite important have voted. So this is indicative of something that may be happening more widely than in just Iowa. So let's not forget it has Iowa has 6 electoral votes. That's the same as Nevada. So if you lost Nevada, you could replace it with Iowa. But I think Wisconsin is the most important, and it also reflects some of the rural areas in Michigan and Pennsylvania and Minnesota, but Minnesota's already leaning Democratic. The other ones are just dead tied, more or less.
Are there new abortion laws that went into place by state legislatures in any of those other states? I know that people have been talking about Kansas, of all places, having the potential to be carried by Harris for this very same reason Iowans seem to be gravitating toward her candidacy. But
Yeah.
I guess the first part first, are there any other laws in some of the states you mentioned that might catapult her to do better in those states?
Well, yes, but it isn't just the laws. People are seeing this in the headlines daily. They're seeing these terrible stories about women losing their lives or losing their capacity to have children because of some botched late operation that couldn't be performed when it really would have saved
I
them early
just did
on.
an interview with a ProPublica reporter who's been covering a number of these deaths in Texas and Georgia that are just nightmare scenarios about OBGYNs and other medical professionals being too afraid to intervene in a crisis situation, and these women are dying.
Yes, they're dying, and many of the OBGYNs are leaving these states. And so women in those states aren't going to have basic care at all. It's not just care about abortion or those sorts of services, it's care generally for those who are dealing with their pregnancies and trying to bring them to term successfully. So this is a much more widespread disaster than gets coverage in the states that, well, quote, don't have to worry about it, like New York or like California or even Virginia, though in Virginia, the Republican governor has tried to restrict abortions. And you're going to see more of that. Anytime there's a Republican legislature or a Republican governor, unless things are changed, unless Roe v. Wade is brought back and Dobbs is overturned, you're going to see a lot of this everywhere.
This is,
Can I just
yeah, go
can I
ahead.
mention the Kansas example is excellent. Katie. This is fascinating because Kansas, as we all know, is a conservative Republican state. But again, people are not automatons. They don't automatically and forever vote either R or D without looking at the candidates and the circumstances of the election. And clearly, in some of these states, including parts of Ohio, even, we've seen a response already to the reproductive services issue. And so I think this might be a surprise to people. It was in 2022 when the overturning of Roe v. Wade became a major issue and produced a stronger Democratic vote than we were expecting in the midterm elections of 2022. Hey, it could happen this year too. It could happen on Tuesday.
Is this the biggest gender gap we've ever seen? I read that something like 43 points between women. Wait, you help me. I don't want to misstate this. What is that 43 points thing?
Yeah, well, it varies from state to state, and we don't have a national election. Probably it's a shame that we don't, but we don't. And so you look state by state. So far, we have the largest gender gap with more men voting Republican versus more women voting Democratic than we have had in pre-election polls since the gender gap began in 1980. That's the first recorded time of the gender gap from 1980 to the present. Now, I often see that on election day, and once we have a chance to analyze the results, it's not as big as the pre-election poll suggested it. But Katie, I will tell you this, it is going to be one of the 2 or 3 largest ever. That's for sure.
And finally, I have to ask you, because someone told me Virginia was in play, and I was like, I have to ask Larry about that.
Yeah.
That didn't seem accurate. You're shaking your head. Tell me about what's going on.
I'm shaking my head vigorously, Katie, because, are you hearing me? Are you hearing me?
Yeah, I'm
Katie?
sorry.
Yeah.
My daughters were FaceTiming me. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Well, they're important, I met one
I'll
of them.
call him
Anyway,
back. I'll call him back.
tell them I'm sorry that I held you up.
Okay.
But no, this has been pushed by the Trump people. They have been trying for weeks to get people to believe that Virginia is a swing state, and New Mexico and New Hampshire. None of these states are swing states. They're going to vote Democratic. Virginia is clearly going to vote Democratic. So they're just doing this because they want to lead their base, the Trump base, into believing that a massive landslide is building. And their views are everywhere in America, and everyone loves Trump. It's just a psychological game they're playing.
And they discounted this latest Iowa poll. What was their reaction to it?
Now, their reaction was to point to another recent poll by Emerson College that showed Trump winning in Iowa. Okay, it's perfectly legitimate to say that, and I'm not going to be shocked if Trump does win in Iowa. I will be shocked if he wins by the margin he won by in 2016 or 2020. I think this poll by Ann Selzer, the Iowa poll, told us something. The Des Moines Register poll told us something. And what it's telling us is, as women toward the end of the campaign focus in on Donald Trump and his views on abortion and the actions of his appointees on the Supreme Court more thoroughly, they're having second thoughts. And those second thoughts will help Kamala Harris.
All right, Larry, I know you got to go. Tell Tyler thanks again. And hopefully I'll see you election night. I'm going to be doing a lot of interviews with smart people like you. So thanks as always, Larry.
Well, I look forward to it, and tell your daughters I'm sorry I held them up.
That's okay. Talk to you soon. Bye.
See
Bye,
you later.
everyone.
Bye-bye.